Welcome back to another episode of The Only Playbook, folks. I am your host, Sweetcar. I got Shobich in Shashot. Everything with the draft is over, so we are pushing forward with what we do best, boys. We are in it. Fantasy football is officially upon us. Yeah, some people will say we're crazy because it's May. We're not crazy. We're the winners. We're the ones that do all the work. That's why we win. So no, it's never too early to start preparing for fantasy football. Today, we got a great episode. We each have two sleepers heading into the 2024 fantasy football season. Is it too early? I guess, Shashot, I'll start with you. Do you feel like it's too early to be thinking about fantasy football?
Dude, I was just at a wedding 2 days ago, Saturday, and I met a lot of my friends from school, and Rena hadn't met any of them before. And the first thing they told her, she asked everybody, she's like, "Oh, how is he in school? How is he, blah, blah, blah." All good things, obviously. But the one thing that was standard amongst everybody was like, "Oh, dude, this guy's fantasy skills are off the charts." So you know what? It's not too late, because if people recognize the work you put in to get what you get out of it, and if the solution to that is knowing fantasy before other people know about the actual information that gets released by like ESPN, Fox, and stuff, if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. It's working, right? So I don't think it's too early at all.
Shobit, you echo those sentiments, or are you still on off-season cruise control?
No, 100%. Yeah, grind don't stop, work don't stop. It starts in February is when your research should be starting. So we're late in that sense. So, it's never too early.
Yeah, absolutely. Echo that sentiment. Again, that is why this room has two of the most championships in our league of anyone. And Shobit is, on the cusp of getting his first, hopefully. So
it's coming.
It's definitely coming. I would say last year, Shobit, was probably your best year in fantasy football that I can remember. And I just think from a holistic standpoint.
In our league, I've won championships before, but in our league.
Yeah, but it's different. Winning a championship can be fluky. It can be lucky, right? Sometimes you can get there in different ways. What I'm saying is last year felt like the most knowledgeable you've been about fantasy football. So that's why a lot of times results don't matter. What you can control is the process, and the results sometimes will dictate themselves, right? So again, be fixated on the process, which I was very impressed with last year. But enough of kissing your butt. Let's get past that. And let's talk about the sleepers. I will kick us off with my biggest sleeper in fantasy football this year, guys. It is Tyrone Tracy Jr., running back for the Giants. 5'11", 210 pounds, coming in as a rookie from Purdue. They lost Saquon Barkley. Their starting running backs are Devin Singletary and Gary Brightwell. So let's think about this for a second. Tyrone Tracy, his measurables are off the charts. 4.48 40-yard dash, 40-inch vertical. I think he was 81st percentile in the three-cone drill. So he has all of the athleticism to be successful. What's even more awesome about this guy is he's actually only played running back for one full season at Purdue. He was a receiver at Iowa. He played with Sam Laporta and them boys catching passes, but that offense didn't pass the ball enough. So he said, I need to go somewhere where I'm going to be utilized a little bit more. So he transferred to Purdue, and the coaching staff literally said, listen, bro, you're going to have to change positions if you want a shot at being in the NFL. And he said, all right, bro. So he became a running back, and this guy is electric. He is absolutely electric, but the best skill set of his that's going to carry forward to me from a fantasy perspective is his ability to catch the football. Let's look at the Giants last year. The Giants last year utilized Saquon Barkley, to the ground, right? He was their entire offense. Now they signed Devin Singletary, who's coming off of a career year with the Texans, but we know that Devin Singletary's forte has never been catching the football. He did it a lot more last year than we would have liked to see because Dameon Pierce just did not have that in his arsenal. But this is where Tyrone Tracy is going to make his money. He is going to be a third down back. He's probably going to be a gadget player that they use because he has hands like a wide receiver, because he used to be a wide receiver, and he has all of the athleticism to succeed. So again, I'm not fearful of Gary Brightwell. I'm not fearful of the signing of Devin Singletary, even though he had a nice year last year. I think for me, this is a true sleeper. I don't know if he's going to go drafted. Personally, if it's 14th, 15th round, I would probably take a flyer on him. But if he goes undrafted, he's a guy that within the first 3 or 4 weeks, you probably want to scoop up. Do you guys have any thoughts on on Tyrone Tracy Jr.?
Yeah, my only thought is that, there's a huge vacancy there. And as we all know, Devin Singletary did a pretty good job last year, but they have a very young squad, and I'm pretty sure they want to get the youth moving while they still can. I'm sure they don't want to pay an old veteran running back big money, even if he does well next year. So I'm certain that he'll get a bulk of the carries at least the second half of the year. It's hard to say what's going to happen, with the training camp, and you always want a comfortable running back there when you have a new offense with a bunch of new players. But I see this happening. This is a very insightful choice here. This is one that not many people are probably jumping on too early.
Yeah, and the thing with him is, again, being that he shifted from a receiver to a running back, a lot of people didn't even evaluate him as a running back, right? But look at some of these numbers, advanced numbers. 4th out of 344 college running backs with at least 100 carries in missed tackles forced. 4th out of 344, right? With at least 100 carries. He was 11th in yards per attempt after contact out of every qualifying running back in college football. So this is a guy that has amazing contact balance. You watch his highlights and he's getting nudged on the leg or hit on the shoulder, and he's basically just bouncing off, right? And he's got the 4.48 speed to hit the home runs. He's shifty. I think he's got all of the tools to be successful. It's just about getting the opportunities, and he's going to have veterans ahead of him. So he's going to have to win that job, or he's going to have to showcase his ability to get playing time. Another aspect to look at from fantasy is, again, this year's a little bit different. So I know we don't draft based on players who are going to return kickoffs, but I'm convinced that we're going to see a lot of very fantasy relevant players be their team's kickoff returners because of the way the kickoff is set up now. So there is going to be opportunity, although slim, for these kickoffs to be 6 points for touchdowns for some of these fantasy players. So just something to think in the back of your mind. Again, not a reason to make a decision, but an added piece or a bonus, if you will, heading into the 2024 season. So to me, Tyrone Tracy is my number one sleeper in fantasy football.
Yeah, we'll jump into Will Levis. In no form, this is my number one sleeper or anything. I already talked about my number one sleeper on prior episodes, some of the wide receivers. But somebody that kind of you want to look at, you want to see, the next Geno Smith of a couple of years ago. These are the type of things I'm kind of seeing in Will Levis at this point, right? So this is a guy who, when he got his first opportunity, he dropped 38.6 fantasy points last year off the bat. Now, no one's going to go to town using that one thing as a reason to have him on your team. And I'm not even saying have him on your team, but I'm saying have him on your team sooner than the next guy will have him on your team, because there are a lot of things pointing towards success from a fantasy perspective, right? First thing, you have a new coach, Brian Callahan, he's an offensive coordinator from the Bengals. And as you know, the Bengals offense has been very successful over the last couple of years. They were never ranked higher than 17th in rush attempts. So long gone are the days of Derrick Henrying this whole offense. So when you think of the Texans or the Titans, what do you think of? You think of running the ball. So people are still going to have that image of the Titans when this season starts. Think of like the 5th best fantasy player on your fantasy league. Right. I will guarantee you that guy still thinks of the Titans as like a running team. So, these are the advantages I'm looking for in players that people are not even looking at. So he's kind of looked in the same category as like the Baker Mayfields. That's the area he's getting drafted. The Baker Mayfields, the Geno Smiths, the Matthew Staffords, and likely he will get drafted lower than a lot of those players. And like I said, here are some reasons why he should be considered higher than all of those guys. And that's one of them is no more Derrick Henry, right? This is a pass first offense where he has the ball in his hands a lot. He already ran the ball at least 4 times a game last year, and adding to more dropbacks, scanning the field more, that equals more rushing plays for the quarterback as well. So now we're talking, maybe 6 to 7 rush attempts a game, maybe even more. And we already know he's not one of those lackluster statue type of guys. He can make a play if given the opportunity to scramble. So that is already opened up into his repertoire, right? He's getting drafted really cheap. He's going undrafted in probably 80+% of the leagues. And nobody's talking about him. No podcast talks about him. No TV channel talks about him. So it's going very under the radar. Just got a new left tackle for protection. We already knew how bad that line was. Got a huge upgrade with probably one of the better future left tackles in our time for the next couple of years. They already got upgrades from a wide receiver standpoint. Again, I think it's more of the situation last year for the Jaguars receivers. I think it's a lot less any one person's fault. I think that just team did a really poor job overall. And so a lot of the Lawrence throws were out of bounds when catching the ball. So I don't want to put fingers on anybody, but the wide receiver core got improved. They already have Hopkins to kind of take care of the veteran presence type of situation there. And the running back situation, right? Like I said, we got rid of the big bulky guy, and we're adding 2 quick guys. Sharp is going to get a big chunk of the carries here and a big chunk of the catches here. And then now we have Tony Pollard, who is probably drafted to do just that. He's not a big in between the tackles guy, going to be catching a lot of passes, but that favors the quarterback as well because he's going to get points out of that. So I'm not saying he's going to get drafted in the top 20. He shouldn't. There's a lot of good guys. There's a lot of young guys that just came in the league that are probably going to put up 25 fantasy points a game. But looking at all the other players that are getting drafted around this range, looking at where you are going to be in week 11 when you have lost Anthony Richardson for another reason, where you have lost so-and-so for another reason, we are not going to be able to find many quarterbacks that can come in and do what Baker Mayfield did last year. So keep an eye out. We're gonna talk about this again later down in the year when this situation comes up, because it always comes up. Everybody always needs a quarterback later down the road. So, like I said, with all the things that I just talked about, keep an eye out for Will Levis to give you at least 18 points a game. That is my floor for Will Levis, at least towards the time of the season where we need him. And that alone puts him in a sleeper category.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting pickup, and he's got a good surrounding cast. Like you mentioned, Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins. They also get Tyler Boyd, to get Tony Pollard, and Tyjae Spears has been there. So everything's kind of in place, and especially with the alignment that they added for him to be successful. I'm a little bit more skeptical on his rushing abilities, but I think that with the talents that he has around him, there's only way you can go is up for Will Levis, just given the more surrounding cast that he has around him now. So solid. Sugar, do you have anything to add, or should I move on to the next one?
No, go ahead. Hit us with your sleeper.
All right. So my sleeper is going to be Malachi Corley, the Yak King. Malachi Corley drafted in the 3rd round by the New York Jets. He's been productive in college. He's elusive. He's fast. Ran a 4.48 40, 4.14 in the seconds in the shuttle, and he had 31% of Western Kentucky's offense. Right. So his competition is Breece Hall, Garrett Williams, and yes, Mike Williams as well. Mike Williams is going through, coming back from an ACL injury. So I think that there could be a chance, given that he gets to see more and more playing time, and that the connection between Aaron Rodgers and Malachi Corley can be established. That's the biggest thing here. If that is something that can be established, a slot receiver that can take 5 yards and go in and turn that into 30 yards is something to be sought out for. And it may not happen week 1, obviously, right? It's a rookie. He's got to get that. Aaron Rodgers expects a lot from his receivers. He's not going to just start throwing the balls to him just because he's known as the Yak King. But I think if they can establish something between them, his route running can be more polished. Later down towards the end of the season, this guy could be a late flyer and someone that we could see be productive because A, injuries, and 2, just the fact that he's understanding the game and just becoming a better route runner and establishing that connection with Aaron Rodgers. So
yeah, I think the biggest problem with him is just going to be how they use him. Like if he's, when we talk about fantasy football, a lot of times we looked at snap count, right? We're like, oh, how often is he on the field and actually getting the ability or the opportunity to actually have a football thrown his way. So that's going to be something to monitor early. Like you said, he's a rookie, so we just don't know how much he's going to play. He was Western Kentucky's whole offense, but Western Kentucky is not a Power 5 school, right? So he's jumping from the level of competition that he played where he dominated to the NFL, which is the highest level of competition. So that same yak ability, as easily and as fluidly as he made it look at Western Kentucky, might not be the same way in the NFL. And like we said, Aaron Rodgers doesn't always utilize his rookie receiver. So I think it's going to be a situation where he's going to, like you said, have to earn his trust. But I'm going to be looking at how they use him. Are they going to design plays specifically? Is he going to be a gadget type player? The more we see him, like, his snap count week 1, maybe like 40%, but it's all about the limited touches. And, if there's explosiveness in how he touches the football, what he decides to do, then that's going to garner him getting more playing time. So for me with him, the intrigue is there. It's just about playing time. I just, because he's not a true wide receiver, it's going to be hard for him to step onto the field in week 1 and like be running routes. Right. So he just lacks some of the wide receiver ability because he's kind of like a Deebo Samuel type player, if you will. So that's my only fear.
Yeah. I just have a quick thing to add, and not too much to add here, but one, Aaron Rodgers was excited with this pick, right? So that tells you everything you need to know. This isn't the same type of situation where like Aaron Rodgers got players just drafted on the team for him in Green Bay, and leading him to not really liking his receiver core as much. Seems like he may have something to do with this addition of Corley from what I've gathered. So that's a plus. But like I said, what matters the most is your availability. And I don't know how much he's going to play. Gadget play seems to be the thing going around the internet. He's going to be used a lot in that type of situation. But the plus here is that Aaron Rodgers will probably try to get him more touches sooner rather than later.
Another thing about that is Aaron Rodgers has said that he can stay in his beach house. So, hey, establish that relationship.
Right.
Start throwing the ball in while you're hanging out in the beach house, and maybe something can come up of it.
Yeah, I'm still on the Garrett Wilson hype train. We have yet to see that explosion first, so I would say, that to me seems like way more likely.
I don't know if anybody's comparing Malachi Corley's situation to Garrett Wilson per se, but I also don't even think it's anywhere close at all. But I just wanted to add the whole Aaron Rodgers perspective that it means something when your quarterback wants you on the team.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so shove it. Who's your second sleeper?
All right, and the snake and I get to go again. So next one is Michael Wilson. So the Arizona Cardinals, I understand, got Marvin Harrison Jr. As their first pick, but I think there was a lot of signs for Michael Wilson that he finished 15 in yards per target among the receivers last year. There's 5 games where he was targeted 6+ times. He finished wide receiver 6, wide receiver 48, 55, 24, wide receiver 24 again. And to end the season. So he ended the season with 31 fantasy points, 6 receptions, 95 yards, 4 receptions, 1 touchdown, right? I think that the biggest competition outside of Marvin Harrison will be Trey McBride for the Arizona Cardinals and for Michael Wilson. So there's certainly a lot of ball to go out. I do understand that they're a balanced team. However, as the wide receiver 2 for the Arizona Cardinals, I think that there is a place where Michael Wilson can see some productivity some weeks here and there, right? Marvin Harrison is a rookie receiver. He should have a good fantasy season, but I think that there's still a place here where Michael Wilson can be productive wide receiver 2. So I would consider him as a sleeper option, someone that people might not be considering, but he's been productive at the end of the season, and I think that can kind of hopefully correlate next year as well. So a guy that I'm looking out for next year.
Yeah, boom or bust type of situations when you're desperate and you're down by like 20 points and Michael Wilson is a possibility. It's like if you have a Gabe Davis, if you have a Michael Wilson, these guys could get you 24 points at any day, or they could with Gabe Davis. So looking at it from that standpoint, I see a lot of games where you get 3 points. I see a lot of games where you get 20 points. So that's just what I would expect what range for him to be at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you nailed. Go ahead. I was going to say you nailed it with the pecking order. It's always going to be tough in fantasy where you're already pegging a guy to be, at best third option, right? I mean, he's obviously going to be behind Marvin Harrison Jr. He's obviously going to be behind Trey McBride in terms of touches, and James Conner is there, and they also drafted Trey Benson, who's going to be probably used quite a bit, at least from pass catching as well. So, I think it's really going to depend on Kyler Murray. What we saw first half of Kyler Murray, who was like an MVP before he got hurt. Yes, he could probably support multiple fantasy options. But like we said, if we're just doing this on a numbers based, if you're projecting out what you think Marvin Harrison's numbers are going to be, and then you project out what you think Trey McBride's going to do, Trey McBride's ADP right now is like that of a top 5 tight end. How much is there going to be left for Michael Wilson to go around? So that would be the only thing with me. But he's a good player. Last year when they didn't have a lot of people, he was the guy that seemed to be the most consistent. So definitely a sleeper. Let's just hope he wakes up. All right, Shashot, who do you got?
Yeah, Zamir White. I'm just sticking with this White thing year after year. If there's anything, everybody learned from the Rachaad White shenanigans last year, it's that you just don't sleep on players that are available, right? If their availability, again, is the king when it comes to anything. The amount of times you're on the fantasy football field matters the most over anything else. So, he gets plenty of touches and he plays the position more than anybody else on the team. So last year when Jacobs got hurt against the Minnesota Vikings, that was one of the worst football games of all time. But what we learned after that game is from weeks 15 to 18, he averaged about 23.3 touches per game and 114 yards per game. And he hauled in 9 receptions during that span, which put him at RB12 status, which is clearly in a 12-man PPR, pretty high up as far as importance goes. Now, where is he getting drafted? He's not getting drafted till the 8th round in a lot of leagues right now, as far as super early mock drafts. That's exactly where Rachaad White was projected last year too. And, again, that's just because people forgot about what it means to get the ball so many times per team. His only competition right now is Alexander Madison, right? And then they drafted some dude in the 6th round to play special teams. So nothing is preventing him from doing exactly what he did from weeks 15 to 18. If there was a concern about coaching change, if Antonio Pierce was leaving, there's going to be some new changes. Nope, it's staying. He's staying. He loves this guy. He's going to use this guy just like how he used him last year. Not much change from a quarterback standpoint. Not much change from anything. It's just going to be a lot of the same Raiders with a couple of new key additions here and there. But the theme stays. The philosophy is the same. So if there's anything we've learned, you have to have a guy like this on your team. And when we talk about sleepers, we're talking about guys going past the 6th, 7th round. And here's an 8th round guy that's going to be the bell cow, most likely, for a team that, has really limited options from anything outside of their best receiver. So just looking at everything, looking at the touches, looking at the division they're in, this is not going to be a situation where they run the ball a whole lot, but this is a situation where he's going to get a lot of catching passes moving forward, and he is going to be the focal point when it comes to anything that's not named Adams. So just from that perspective, it's pretty easy. If you're talking about sleepers, this is about as sleeping as it gets for usage and from productivity standpoint.
Yeah, I would say just don't sleep on Brock Bowers, right? They're probably going to find ways to get him involved as well. And he's taking him that early in the draft. You got to imagine that he's going to be like the heir apparent to Devontae Adams because Adams is getting old. But like you said, Alexander Madison is definitely not a name to be impressed with, and he's second on that depth chart. So if there's anything that we know, especially with the Raiders, especially with having Jacobs last year when Zamir White was on the roster, for some reason, they're a big bell cow kind of team, right? So if they have a 1A, that's going to be their guy. At least that's what they showed with Jacobs. They worked him to the ground and then they let him go. So I think expecting similar usage from Zamir White is a pretty safe bet. Chauvin, anything to add on Zamir?
No, I mean, it just seems like he's going to be a bell cow running back. So I have nothing to add on that. That sounds like the fact that he's going in the 8th round, like you mentioned, that just seems criminal.
Yeah, 8th round of casual drafts. Ours, he'll probably go in like the 4th.
Right.
All right, so that leaves me with my final sleeper, and it is Joe Mixon. Maybe not somebody people would think would be a sleeper per se, but Joe Mixon leaving the Bengals, heading to the Texans this year, age 27 season. We know that is the allotted age where running backs hit that cliff and eventually fall off. So I am banking on him to still be on top of that cliff and not fall off at least for one more season for me. So last 6 seasons, you look at Joe Mixon, running back 13 or better in 5 of the 6 seasons, with 4 of those 6 seasons being a top 10 finisher. So we know that he can be productive. What have we seen from his production, guys? He played in an awesome offense with a terrible offensive line, was incredibly inefficient, and still finished top 10 in 4 or 6 seasons, right? Now he's leaving that. He's leaving that offensive line that's so putrid, and he's going to Houston where they have an incredible offensive line. They have an offense that's basically what the Bengals had, but 3 years ago, right? So when Joe Burrow was on the up and up, they had just taken Chase. Higgins was young. That's basically what the Texans are now with CJ Stroud and Tank Dell and Nico Collins. And not to mention they got Stephon Diggs. So, I understand that they still have running backs in that running back room, but what I am banking on is this guy should score between 10 to 12 touchdowns this year. The Houston Texans should be a top 5 to top 10 offense. So the opportunities are going to be all there. And what's even crazier is I talked about it. We had Devin Singletary, I think last year caught 30 passes on 38 targets for that offense, which was the highest he's ever had. And even with that, they still had Pierce catching passes, knowing that Pierce is not really a pass catching down or a running back. Mixon can do all that. So Mixon can catch those passes, which means his usage the last 2 years where he had, 70, close to 70 targets, that's something that they can translate right over. They don't have to wait for a backup running back to come in to do that. I think he's going to see as heavy a workload as he's ever seen. And I think this offense is going to be the biggest reason he's going to be a benefactor. So RB 15, 16 right now, there's no world or no reason why Joe Mixon to me should not finish inside the top 10 in terms of running backs. Thoughts, questions, concerns, pushback?
No, I mean, if Joe Mixon can't do it well with what's going on around him here, that would be a problem, but I don't see that happening at all. Anybody can be placed back there and produce, and Joe Mixon has done it for many years, so I'm not worried at all.
Yeah, like we hate on Joe Mixon every year. Yeah, Joe Mixon is productive every year, but we hate on him because he's incredibly inefficiently productive.
we hate on him because he gets compared to people like Jonathan Taylor, right? So like he's in the top 10, but he's never in the top 3. You know what I mean? Like, so he has to be placed where he's supposed to be placed, and that's like the 7, 8, 9, 10 range. And if you're telling me that, then that's a solid in every single year.
Yeah, and the competition isn't really that high with them, right? Damian Pierce, Dario Ogunbowale, like those aren't running backs that you're worried about taking his job. So yeah, Joe Mixon should be the guy there.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. That is it, right? 2 sleepers each. Did you guys have anybody when you were doing this exercise that you were like, oh, I kind of wanted to talk about him, but didn't get to it? Last chance, throw some names out.
You got a couple of them.
I know I do, but I just wanted to give you guys a chance before I spit out my names.
Nah, there's a lot. There's a lot, but we'll talk about those throughout the year. You go ahead and tell us your 2.
Okay, so real quick, this is a little bit situational, but the way I'm thinking about this is I've been on this bandwagon since pre-draft, and I'm going to continue to ride it. It's Ricky Pearsall with the 49ers, and I know we're talking about fantasy, and you look at that roster, and you're like, how's that possible? They have George Kittle, they have CMC, they have Debo, they have Ayuk. Like, there's no chance this guy's going to be fantasy relevant, right? Well, something really interesting to think about, guys, is all offseason, there's been rumors about them trading one of their receivers, maybe both of their receivers, which would be criminal, but financially, it's not going to work for them to pay both. So are they going to trade Ayuk? Or are they going to trade Debo? Now, crunching the numbers, if they wait after June 1st to cut Debo Samuel, they save $22 million to the cap. I mean, that is an insane number, right? Post June 1st, $22 million, which they can then turn around and extend Ayuk. And then now they have wide receiver 2, Ricky Pearsall, who, again, what Ricky Pearsall does, what Debo Samuel doesn't do. Ricky Pearsall gets open. Ricky Pearsall runs crisp routes and creates separation. He's basically like another Brandon Ayuk, right? So you're going to have 2 guys now that can get open, create separation at will. Debo has his own unicorn, but he's not known to be a route runner that's just getting open every time you look at him. So now you're getting rid of a $22 million player hypothetically, and you exchange him with a younger, faster, pennies on the dollar player who is going to fill in that wide receiver 2 role. I think second half of the year, or maybe even early on, if Debo does in fact get traded post June 1st, Ricky Pearsall can carve out a really nice role for himself in fantasy. You guys,
he's already getting compared to people like Cooper Kupp. I don't know where they're getting that comparison from, because one's 6'2" and one's 5'11". But I mean, that's huge to hear. If you're Ricky Pearsall or Ricky Pearsall owners already, it's just going to be production, man. There's going to be a lot of production. It's also one of the players that I mentioned before the draft as well. Didn't really matter where they landed; they were going to make room for him. He's one of those players that just a quarterback's best friend. You know, he'll get open. They just have to place the ball where they need to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Any thoughts on that, Tad Shovit?
No, I mean, that's solid. I think that the fact that I didn't know about the whole Ayuk and then the money that they would save if Debo Samuel was cut, and that would be huge. I mean, wide receiver 1, Ayuk, wide receiver 2, Ricky Pearsall. That sounds like a really good thing for Pearsall as well. So solid.
And the last guy, guys, it's not even necessarily a guy, but I just want to bring up the intrigue about this team because I haven't been able to stop thinking about them. And then the fact that the Indianapolis Colts had AD Mitchell fall to them again. I'm still going to go out on a limb and say I do not understand how he possibly fell. To me, it makes no sense. But if it is the diabetes, if it is the low work ethic, whatever the case may be, I'm already kind of over that and putting that to rest with the fact that this guy took number 10 because there was 10 receivers that were drafted ahead of him. And the fact that how he plays works so well with Anthony Richardson. Okay. So stay with me for a second. We have Michael Pittman Jr. We know what he is. He's basically like a little bit better of a possession receiver. He's not quite an athletic specimen from the speed size perspective, right? So he's your possession guy. Yes, Mike Evans. There you go. You have Josh Downs, who's going to be your slot gadget, right? Who's going to basically be your Tank Dell, if you will. What you need is a true wide receiver who can take the top off. That's what they wanted Alec Pierce to be. And that's what Alec Pierce could not be. He has not been that yet. Enter AD Mitchell. The guy runs a 4.34 or 4.38 40-yard dash. He's got like an over 40-inch vertical. I think he had, my God, you can probably count on one hand the amount of drops he had in college. So there truly is no weakness in this guy's game other than the fact that, we just don't know if he cares a little bit and he has diabetes. Like, come on, guys. We've seen stupider reasons for guys falling and been like, wow, that was a mistake. This is going to be a mistake. And this Colts offense, I don't know what piece of this Colts offense I'm going to end up with or you guys want. But what I know is this is the year where either you want Anthony Richardson, you want Jonathan Taylor, or you want, in my opinion, over Michael Pittman Jr., I would be drafting based on ADP and value of where you can get AD Mitchell. Right now, he's like wide receiver 50. It is just stupid. It doesn't make any sense. You're telling me he's not even a wide receiver 3 on a fantasy roster? Absolutely bullshit. I have so much hype on this guy, and the fact that he is being drafted as a receiver who wouldn't even be startable in an explosive offense with the guy who loves to throw the football deep. I think it's a match made in heaven. So I absolutely love AD Mitchell. I love the Colts this year from a fantasy perspective.
The only issue that I have with that is that you just don't know what you're going to get from Anthony Richardson this year, coming from, I think, like a shoulder injury. So you don't know if he's going to be like, his accuracy has always been the concern. I think fantasy wise, he's going to be great quarterback because he has that rushing ability. He's going to be able to produce, get you the points, get you those rushing touchdowns. How will he use his receivers with all of those options that you have? And we didn't even talk about Alec Pierce, that's also in that mix as well, right? So Anthony Richardson to me is probably the reason why AD Mitchell isn't probably going to be as productive as you would want him to be. But I don't think it's a knock on AD Mitchell. I thought he was going to be better than Worthy. I thought he was a better prospect. But it's all on Anthony Richardson, whether or not he can show that he's an accurate quarterback, in which he hasn't really done yet, and because of his injury.
That was one of the greatest things you've ever said, Shovit. It really well put. That explained everything, the way I feel about this offense as well. I mean, I thought this was the best draft that any team did, right? So like they did everything right. Grabbing a guy that talented, no matter, I don't think it's the diabetes. I think it's like the off-field issues or like not paying attention or not following rules. That can change immediately once you come into the NFL, as we've seen with Randy Moss and we've seen with Dalvin Cook. A lot of these players, you just need to rewire them, and I'm sure they'll do that. This is one of those situations where I have to use one of these strategies that I would do in order to find the best player that I need on my team. And I think the only way to move forward here is, everybody's so good on this offense. What I would have to do is I would have to figure out, how many times does Anthony Richardson throw the ball per game, first of all. Number two, how many scoring opportunities does Anthony Richardson actually run for the score, right? So we're lowering the amount of possible scoring opportunities, and we're lowering the amount of reception opportunities. But again, for me personally, AD Mitchell next year is going to be drafted extremely high. This first year, just because Anthony Richardson didn't get a complete year, he's still in this like training process. I have no doubt he's going to be an amazing fantasy player, like you said, Chovit. But from a pure volume passer perspective, like Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, they've thrown the ball 50 times a game. Can Anthony Richardson do that to give us the points? Because as of right now, Michael Pittman's still the guy that's going to be scoring probably the most fantasy points by the end of the season. AD Mitchell is primed for success. I just hope it's sooner rather than later. And I'm a little bit hesitant that it will be soon enough for me to draft, let's say, him over like a backup running back that I know will come into the picture soon. But we'll see. It's going to be fun. I just don't know when the fun will begin.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't have as much concerns with Anthony Richardson passing either. Yeah, like I guess accuracy, but again, everything that I've heard from training camp and how he's basically worked behind the scenes while he's been hurt has been exactly that. He's working on his passing. So I don't know. They're raving about him, and I just think we watched like a mediocre offense basically play well with Gardner Minshew. Like Gardner Minshew was able to run that offense pretty well and support fantasy players, support Michael Pittman as well. So I just think the home run hitting threat of Anthony Richardson, what he uses with his legs, like we mentioned, opening up the passing is where where AD Mitchell is going to make his money. And again, year one, I'm looking at a sleeper. I'm not saying he'll be top 10, but he's wide receiver 50 on ADP right now, which is, again, in a 3 wide receiver set, wide receiver 36 would be your wide receiver 3. So they're saying that he's not even startable, which I would absolutely push back. And I'd say by like week 5, week 6, he's going to be startable. So I'm buying into the offense. I'm buying into Anthony Richardson. I'm buying into Shane Steichen. That should have been my biggest point. The Colts are run by Shane Steichen, who 2 years ago had the Eagles playing some of the best offense I'd ever seen. And then last year we were like, what the fuck happened to the Eagles? All of a sudden they can't throw. Jalen Hurts sucks. No, what happened is Shane Steichen opened up that offense for them and he's gone. So Shane Steichen is now opening up that same offense for Anthony Richardson. That's why I think AD Mitchell and Anthony Richardson and that entire offense is going to be absolutely clicking and firing on all cylinders. that is it, guys. That is the sleepers. It is May, so there will probably be more sleepers in June. There'll probably be more sleepers in July, and probably more sleepers in August. So
and there'll be a lot more injuries too, unfortunately.
Absolutely. So that is all we have for today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like, hit the subscribe. It helps spread the word. Follow us on socials, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, at The Only Playbook. I am Sweetcard. That is Shovit. That is Shashot. We are back next week. We don't know what we're talking about yet, but it is going to be football related. So stay tuned. Thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode. Have a fantastic rest of your day.